Hi, my name is Holly Antel. This video is about the theory of metaphysical limits, a portfolio I have created, which covers areas of philosophy, including metaphysics and theology. This video also covers my kind of basic theological ideas um, surrounding God, existence, what it means to be human, and what that means for us in terms of an afterlife. Um, this topic is typically approached from a religious or spiritual perspective. By contrast, I'm trying to approach this from a philosophical and logical and mathematical perspective. Um, I, I'm putting forth theories that are very different than religion and spiritual practice, a lot more simplified. Um, but it also builds off of metaphysical philosophy and existentialist philosophy as well. Metaphysics is the philosophy of that studies the fundamental nature of being, reality, and existence. Whereas existentialism can be considered a branch of metaphysics, and it studies what it means to be human, what it means to exist as a human, is the field of existentialism within philosophy. And this portfolio touches on both, and also builds upon my novel theology, which is the case for, creationism, that we were created, that we were intelligently designed, but that we can look to our intelligent design and to questions of God and existence, in a very methodical and scientific way, rather than a fantastical or kind of supernatural way, as put forth by most religions. So, to get started, I will share my screen of my portfolio. The Theory of Metaphysical Limits. And I do very much welcome donations to my Cash App. This is very independent math research, and I'm currently unemployed. I'm trying to get a job doing professional research. So donations are quite appreciated right now. My cash tag is CoffeeCrow420. Thank you for that little uh, call to action there. Um, so I believe philosophy is the pursuit of truth, and that science is a tool of that. So, science reveals data, it reveals information, it tells us things about the world. We're able to measure and gather information using science. But to me, science is just kind of like numbers. It's just like data. It's the interpretation of it, where the truth comes out. And so it's how it's interpreted is where truth is found. And that's where I think philosophy should come into play and does come into play when it's done correctly. So I reference Jean-Paul Sartre. He's my favorite philosopher. I agree with him about half the time and disagree with him about half the time. Um, but I reference him a lot in this because I've studied him the most. And I he says a lot of very important things. But it's funny because he was an atheist. He's an atheist, so existential. So you take existentialism, and it's the like philosophy behind what it means to be human. And so you have the atheist existentialists, and then you have the theist existentialists. Um, Kierkegaard, for example, he's considered the father of existentialism. He is a Christian. He was a Christian. So, and he also said that essence precedes existence, so that like you're fated or destined to become someone, like who you are is like a pre-planned fate or destiny. Um, and Jean-Paul Sartre, who really developed existentialism as a philosophy, he said the opposite, and he was an atheist. He said that essence precedes existence, and I think that is most accurate. I do think we do have, or rather, he said that existence precedes essence, so that like you exist and then you become yourself. It's not pre-planned or predestined. Free will is like what makes you you, and I agree with that. But But I do think there is some essence that does precede our existence. So like, we have our facticity, and Jean-Paul Sartre talks about that a lot. Facticity in existentialism is the concept of like uh set things in life, set limitations in life that cannot be helped or changed. It's just how it is. So like where you're born, who your parents are, what kind of socioeconomic class you grew up in. Those are all considered aspects of your facticity. So stuff that cannot be helped. And that stuff ultimately shapes who we are and who we become and all that. And so I think there are more aspects to that, genetics and other things that contribute to who we eventually become. But I think for the most part, I agree with Sartre rather than Kierkegaard that existence precedes essence. So the essence meaning like who we are as a person, and existence is just like the state of existing in of itself is what he's talking about with that. But yes, so Jean-Paul Sartre is an atheist existentialist. He famously said that heaven is unintelligible, and because it's unintelligible, there's no hope for it. Um, and I'm here to argue that heaven can, in fact, be intelligible, both logically, conceptually, and mathematically. Uh, so, and because it can be mathematically possible, it could be true. So, all real things can be mathematically represented, but not all functional mathematical equations or representation can represent real things. So for something to be true or real, I believe it can be described in math in some way. Um, and I haven't studied that much in math to know like how that's been said before. Um, but so I have a little bit of I think there's a little bit of corruption in like theoretical physics and physics of the small, because like you can create arbitrary math and you can create math that works, but doesn't necessarily represent anything real. And a big problem with like gatekeeping math and science, and I think it should be made more accessible to people, uh, these fields, helps us so that it can't be like, I think that for something to be held as scientifically true, its proof should be available to the public. Like you should like we can, the public can access telescopes, for example, and do that kind of stuff. So, but I think like for scientific veracity, I think the goal should be like the public can peer review it at any time. It should be that accessible, I think. And it's really gate kept. Um, but I think for things to be possible, they have to be mathematically representable. Um, so this to me is very exciting because this means that heaven is possible, which is very cool. I believe I'm going there. I would hope to go there. But you know, being able to describe it in math kind of gives it a layer of it could happen. And I think it's cool to talk about theology and metaphysics in this way, because the math is pretty simple. And these concepts are really accessible, I think, for other people to be able to like examine and, see for themselves. So I try to do the opposite of gatekeeping. I try to make, really tough philosophical or mathematical concepts easy to understand. And I'm also in a constant state of learning and teaching myself. I created some differential equations accidentally. I've only taken up to pre-calculus. But I somehow managed to create some novel differential equations, representing heaven, hell, and death, which I think is really cool. Um, with the help of ChatGPT. And because I've had like I take a little bit of calculus. COVID happened during my calculus semester, so I didn't finish calculus, but I got a 4.0 in pre-calculus. Um, and so I have some familiarity with how calculus equations work, but I'm not that great at them. But I'm really talented at making like logical statements that can like categorize a lot of phenomena within uh, infinite possibilities, like I have with astrological charts. So any infinite number of astrological charts can be plugged into my math, and it will always fall into one of seven categories. Um, and I'm really good at thinking in terms of kind of calculus logic, but I'm not so good at the math part. So that's where ChatGPT has been really helpful. Because I can make really clean logical statements as inputs and outputs, usable functional equations. So that's really cool, I think. Um, but so I'm here to say to start, no, heaven is intelligible. Um, but it's just ironic that I agree most with the atheist existentialists because he said a lot of really important things about like working them to be free, like free will is like the most important, virtue of our life. And I think that our life is a test of our free will. And that's part of my theology is that um the human lifetime is a test of free will to see if you can live in a cooperative heaven in perpetuity. Um, and I think it's as simple as that. And people either pass or fail that test. Um, and, you know, failing that test, being a terrible person, doing terrible things to other people might result in like punishment because like you squandered, you know, happiness forever. You created problems for each other and God himself probably. I think so anyway. Um, so I think that when discussing the afterlife, I've never seen it approached with math before. I've never seen it approached with really logic before describing God. And so it's like, I've had my own spiritual journey trying to figure this stuff out and trying to figure out the like simplest explanation for existence in God. And um it kind of starts with that like God is like we were intended um to be autonomous free will agents, like to be our own person, to have our own identities, to have free will. But we need to be able to use our free will in a cooperative uh good promoting way with other people in order to be, trusted with having free will forever. I think free will is the most powerful thing on the planet, human free will. Um, Animals don't quite have free will because they're part of the food chain still. We're off the food chain. Um, and I think there's so much evidence for intelligent design by looking at the history of the human species, how quickly we developed intelligence and intelligence that we're made to become self-aware and to become curious, so to learn new things, to pursue truth, and also to be creative. And we developed very quickly into this kind of like free world where we can do that. We can explore curiosity, we can explore creativity with our free will. And the way it seems set up is very well intended. I would argue that we have a morally or ethically good God or intelligent designer of this universe. Uh, but just because, uh, and another thing that is radically different from religion is I do not believe God is all knowing, all present, or all powerful. So the religious terms are typically omniscient for all knowing, omnipotent for all powerful, and omnipresent um, for all present. So I do not believe God has any of those. And I use some logic to describe why I think that's impossible and why it's a good thing that God would not be all knowing. Um, So I don't think God is like working through us or is omnipresent. When I say paternalistic puppeteer, like I don't think, I see like late stage capitalism as like monopoly. And I don't think, we were created to be like him playing puppets. You know what I mean? I think it's really weird to think that God is working through people or like directly interfering with human lives. We don't really have evidence for that. Um, I think if God has interfered with human lives, it's like through a concept of the subconscious, like Carl Jung has said, or perhaps like, certain math equations or scientific discoveries were put into this collective subconscious, and those who were able to like put in the work and the learning to like get to be able to realize it, you know, um, got that kind of, inspiration. I speculate that's about as far as God goes in terms of human interference, because allowing us to develop naturally, I think we're an experiment in the other, like what an other truly is to God, someone with autonomy and consciousness and self-perception. So, and with free will. And so that's what humans share with God. Um, that animals don't is free will because animals are still in the food chain, so they lack that free will. Us being off the food chain, I'm saying, is what gives us the ability to have free will. And that is the highest virtue in a test. And that reflects. So I believe we can self-reflect to some extent to understand God. So like there being one God, we are, one consciousness, one identity within one body. I think that would probably closely describe something, God's version of that. He has one identity, with a limited number of perspectives. Um, so So I think we can self-reflect to say that he has like one perspective and not like, and he's not all present. He doesn't see every layer of existence and he's not all-knowing. So all-knowing is kind of talked about flippantly, but if you think about it, if you know everything, then you can predict everything. It's constant prediction of what's going to happen next forever, which sounds miserable to me. I'm a smart person, not as smart as God, but a smart person. And that sounds miserable, just being able to predict what will happen next forever. That sounds like a hell forever. And so I think any rational, like intelligent being that would be stuck in that kind of cycle, they would want to find the quickest exit out of that, um, given they are intelligent. So, because he opted to instead create creation instead of do that, I believe that indicates he's probably not all knowing, because that would get boring fast, especially if you've been around forever, or for a long time. So if so long as I'm saying that so long as omniscience or all-knowing is impossible, then there can be eternal novelty throughout eternity for both God and us in creation. So you kind of want eternal novelty. You don't want constant novelty, because that in itself becomes a paradox. But you want some consistency and some novelty in order, if we can think about eternity in a serious way, it's like, well, eternity is a scary thing. How do we approach it in a way conceptually that isn't terrifying? Because if you think of like angels with harps on clouds, it gets it sounds boring quick and boring. And that's like, the first concern. And even in The Good Place, which is a great TV show, um, they inevitably get bored in heaven and just like kind of dissolve into God's love or whatever is how they do it. So no one's really tackled philosophically heaven that doesn't get boring, or heaven that can actually like sustain, like being able to imagine it being intelligible. I think the first step to that is eliminating the possibility of omniscience for both God and creation. So long as like God doesn't know everything, because he's not, because I think we can self-reflect and say that he's like a kind of a one perspective, mostly probably has finite ability to like do more, but like not infinite. Um, then like we can kind of say that he's not omnipresent. So he's not so he's not like because he's not observing everything, he can't possibly know everything. So sorry, this gets a little bit difficult to explain in logic. But so because he's not omniscient, he can't be omnipresent. Like being able to observe everything at every scale, that would kind of approach omniscience, being able to observe it so well that you can like predict it. Um, and then omnipotence would require omniscience. So these things kind of like end up contradicting, um, and falling apart. So, but it's a good thing that God doesn't know everything, because it means we won't ever reach a state of knowing everything. So we're not going to be stuck in cycles of like being able to predict everything that will happen. Um, and so, but imagining like what would make heaven, and it would be like, okay, novelty. We want some stability. We want a core stability, like our identity, but like we expand, as we form new memories, we always stay who we are. And, maybe we'll keep sleep. Maybe sleep is a part of the thing forever. Um, but, no one really approaches eternity in like a practical way of like, how would that be okay? And like religion just throws up ideas of like, you know, just God has it covered. God, don't worry about it. God has it covered. And it's like, no, we should figure out how this might work. Especially if it's ahead of us. Like we exist and it's possible. And if we have a creator, that's like the greatest possibility there is that we could exist forever and it'd be a good thing and in heaven. And so it's like, if we are intelligently designed, that's definitely on the table. We should figure out how that's even possible given what we know from what lived experience is, um, with free will and in this world. Because it seems like we're kind of intended to do this for longer than just a small human lifetime. Um, so I'm going to end up saying in future philosophy, I argue that like heaven is attainable here on earth. Like the material plane, what we have now is like the start or is like the peak of existence. Like there's no better place you go to. This is the best we have. The best there is here on this planet, is what I think. That's my theory of heaven. Like heaven is earth. It's trashed right now. It's completely corrupted. It's operating quite like hell, in my opinion. But that peak existence is life to live on earth. And that's part of this whole theory. Is that that's peak kind of existence. That's what you got to look forward to. There's no better place. Is what I mean. It's really better than what we have now running on this planet, which is awful. But it's kind of the concept of, you know, leisure activity, friends, uh, having a good time. I think doing drugs, personally, just my opinion. Um, but having relationships, having curiosity and creativity and, eating and sleeping. And I think we're meant to do this kind of stuff forever. But it can be done in such a way that, if we eliminate stuff that we enjoy doing and eventually becoming ahedonic. So remove like ahedonia. So if you love playing golf, you'll like it more and more throughout time. And that's what I've kind of developed mathematically, is that that's possible, that you can enjoy golf more and more throughout time rather than have it reverse into ahedonia. Um, or other for me, it's not golf, it's ping pong. I love ping pong. I do feel like I enjoy it more every time I play it. But and also being able to learn new things occasionally and always pursue truth and always have something to pursue in terms of curiosity and creativity. So it's like Alan Watts is a philosopher. He talks a lot about the importance of having goals to achieve instead of them being survival based as we have in our current horrible capitalistic society. It can be more about, those curiosity goals or those creativity goals, keeping it like benchmarks for us, like the Sisyphean dilemma, if we want to get into weird existentialism with Camus and absurdism. But, the Sisyphean dilemma is, achieving creative and curiosity type goals. Um, we don't have to get, 1 degree and that's it. We can pursue learning and that kind of stuff, which would be cool. So I do think that life on Earth is like peak existence. I mean, it's being trashed right now, unfortunately, because human free will is an experiment that has gone horribly wrong, it seems. Um, but I, you know, I think we want to be able to completely understand and conceptually comprehend what it would be. Um, and I think we can right here on Earth. So, this is a little differential equation I created. Uh, Eternal heaven is where your quality of life gradually increases over time and is in exponential growth. Eternal hell is where your quality of life gradually decreases over time and is in exponential decay. Um, this doesn't say one way or another if hell is true or certain, finite, eternal. This just brings out the possibility that like if eternal heaven is possible, eternal hell is possible too. Um, it is as mathematically possible, so mathematically possible that it belongs in the same equation with heaven. Um, so so QT is the quality of life as a function of time T. Um, so Q is like, we'll say quality of life score, like how happy you feel, like rating like how high your dopamine's getting you or whatever. That can be Q. T, I do years. So 1T is 1 year. Or T1 is 1 year, T.5 is 6 months. Um, so, and lambda is your karmic score. So if our lifetimes are a test of free will, how you did on that test, if you end up going to the bad place, will be lambda. In terms of heaven, your karmic score might determine like if there's like a purgatory situation where you gotta like repent for some bad deeds for a period of time before getting to heaven, or a limbo type situation. That's possible. I haven't had time to put the math onto this portfolio, but I've developed some purgatory type math too. Um, but the idea for lambda for heaven is that everyone in heaven has the same lambda score. So you continue that exponential growth um, at the same rate of just life getting better and better. So your quality of life just once you're in heaven, it grows at a very comfortable rate. You enjoy golf more every time you play it. You enjoy your favorite food every time you eat it. Um, Kind of thing. So that can happen. Um, Mathematically it's possible. It's possible. Not saying it's, certain, but it's possible. Which is really cool that you can enjoy things more as time goes on and develop like more meaning in your relationships and forming like meaningful memories and stuff like that and doing cool things and you know um the human nature has been kind of like negative, not so great over the years, and so we've really focused science on computation and computers, which is just kind of like one electronic that's out there. Electronics are so much cooler, I think, than technology. Um, but I just, I think our current world could be so much better and we could be so much more technologically advanced had there been ethics governing science and advancement and stuff like that, and not politics. You know, we can consider politics the opposite of ethics, in my philosophical opinion. So, because of that, I think we're really behind in terms of technology, and what we have now is just kind of like not worth worrying about too much, in my humble opinion. Um, so in I should have done a graph, but you can kind of do a mini one. So this is the heaven curve on a graph. So always going away from zero, which represents death in my theorem. And then hell is a concept I thought of that's like always approaching zero, but never hitting zero, which is a creepy, but I think interesting concept of hell. So like always approaching death, but never reaching it. Um, is quite a horrifying thing to imagine. Um, but this is what these end up looking like on a graph, of course. Did not do the red one. The red one's a little bit harder to do because it's getting closer to zero, but never quite crossing it. Um, so that those two look like on a graph. Um, and so we're zero, the eternal death. So once you hit zero, uh, you're just kind of gone forever. So eternal death can be speculated on mathematically, which I think makes it possible. So this solution is for like a heaven type score. So let's say the heaven lambda score is 4.20, I think it should be. You plug it in here. I don't have a calculator, but so at year zero, your quality of life is 1, and then at 6 months in heaven, your quality of life is 8.17. At 1 year, it's just kind of how your quality of life just goes up and up and up and up. You enjoy things more and more and more. Um, as time goes on. So this equation would be graphing that blue line on the graph I just did. Um, so if you say that eternal hell is possible, you want to be able to say that finite hell is possible or just death is possible. Um, so this T of J is a judgment time when a karmic debt is considered resolved. So this makes it mathematically and theoretically possible that hell will not be eternal, basically. I didn't want to put math out there for eternal heaven and eternal hell and not be able to like say mathematically that like that's all there's possible mathematically. No, there's several things possible mathematically that I haven't gotten to yet. But so finite hell would be an addition to the function where it approaches zero in exponential decay up until the 86 years and it just drops to zero finally. So it's just kind of like having it's a way of having something in exponential decay and then just being able to like get them to zero or eternal death. So that's how that's mathematically possible. Um, and then making it more of a dynamical system, so something that kind of mirrors different sciences like biology, um, creating dynamical systems. So this is where it gets into math, like, so the phase is extremely simple. You can have lambda b or the quality of life, rather, um, can be anywhere from negative infinity to positive infinity. Um, so there's no limit basically to this exponential growth for heaven or the exponential decay for eternal hell, if that's what it is. Um, but finite hell is also possible and no hell is also possible. Uh, so these are just ways of saying that this could mathematically work. Um, but if we can turn the equation for heaven into a vector by saying that like imagine like quality of life, we can do curiosity and creativity. We can add those as factors. Um, and that, relationships, love, friendship, all that kind of stuff. Which further, it's a way of saying that like you enjoy golf every time that you golf. You can spread it out to where there's a rate of increase for individual things that can branch from the central equation. I think I'm getting this right. I'm learning differential equations as as I'm creating them on ChatGPT. So, a theorem of reality expansion. This is where the equations are a little bit more creative and they're not, I don't know if they're functional. The other ones I can recognize how to do and if it's working or not and what it should look like on a graph, but like I don't for these. Uh, but I'll get there eventually. I'm teaching myself differential equations. So this is kind of like probably the basis of my theory of omniphysics. Omniphysics, one of my theological papers, I define it as the kind of physics that God's environment prior to the Big Bang. Um, so where God was to create the Big Bang, that version of physics, like the physics that he has to deal with as part of his facticity, that's omniphysics. Um, and this is probably my basic equation for that omniphysics is going to be this. Um, that I'm trying to kind of express that like limitations in reality, like you need limitations. You can't just be all knowing, all perceiving, all everything. You need limitations. Limitations give rise to a tangible reality. Um, and so within limitations, novel things can be done in perpetuity. And this kind of just represents what omniphysics would look like. It's just kind of like the physics type constraints of God's environment and of God. Um, is what I want this to represent. But because there are limits, because not everything can be known, because new knowledge is constantly being created and new things to know. Omniscience cannot be approached by any in creation or by God himself, and that will give rise to enough novel experiences to have fun forever. Um, and I also think that there's only one reality. It's tied to this physical universe. It's the main reality. Um, my overall theory is that like God created creation, probably to have companionship, not of everyone in creation. I don't think he's a quantity over quality kind of guy. Uh, and that would be a little bit ethically weird to want to be friends or have a relationship with like, oh God, your time forever kind of thing. So when you say that like everyone's God's children, you get into kind of like ethical bad areas in terms of not everyone should be we should not have it would be wrong for everyone in creation to have a utility to God. They should just be ends in of themselves, as Kant would say. So like you're created just for to enjoy life. Like uh God wanted like one or few companions, and in order to create them, many had to be created. Um, and so people and animals just kind of exist, and they exist as ends of in of themselves. So just to, enjoy reality forever. I speculate that animals have reincarnated and been around for a long time. And so that they have a little bit, they're smarter than we take them for by a large margin, I think. Um, but so I think that's kind of the purpose, really, of the human thing. It's just God, wanted companionship and wanted those companions to be born with free will and develop free will choices and ethics and personalities and complete autonomy and, snowflake personality. So, I think the simplest thing possible is like, there's few people intended for that, but most creation, most people, most everything is intended just to be, enjoy life, explore curiosity and explore creativity and perpetuity and have fun doing it with each other. Um, but in order to be able to allow to do that in perpetuity, you first have to pass the test of free will. So I think animals kind of like they kind of got a shoe in into heaven, like because they lack free will, they got to learn and study it and understand its importance and understand, that kind of thing. So, but for humans, we had kind of a different life experience than animals do. That's just kind of my theological and spiritual beliefs. Um, but so, in order to exist forever and, the luxury of living experience that we experience here on Earth, you have to be able to cooperatively use your free will. Um, and, you know, historically, humans have not been great at that, but especially now on this planet, like, you know, we are so exploited and uh, so many terrible things happen to keep capitalism going. The Earth's exploited, labor is exploited. It's a horrible system we have on this planet. Um, and I think it goes against what is intended on this planet, and it goes against like passing that free will test. But there are ways to resist, and there are ways we can have a better world and build towards better things. People just have to choose to do it with their free will. That's the tricky part. Um, but I do think it's important that like reality is mainly focused on this universe. I think it's important. Um, so a lot of theories out there claiming multiverse. Scientists said this is possible. I'm like, oh, what is science doing right now? But I digress. Um, but so this is my theorem of one reality. And I'm trying to create a math equation that is like, only so many things are possible. Um, humans are really predictable right now because only so many things are possible. Like I will only go to so many stores within walking distance. I will only do so many things the way this rat race is set up, right? So, in a utopic world or a heaven type world, we'd have a lot more possibilities. But there's only so many logical possibilities that can be available to us at any time. Like, I have grape juice in my fridge and in this cup. So there's only so many possibilities for what I can do tonight or sip on tonight. Um, and so this equation is trying to build towards like gathering how many possibilities there are, and then what the odds are of each possibility. So the odds I'm going to drink, milk or chai as opposed to grape juice. Um, but on kind of a bigger scale. Um, and another thing I'm trying to represent mathematically here is that um, all the possibilities for what I might do in my life, like that, those possibilities don't like become possible until a certain point in time is hit. So it's like everything I'll do this year, these possibilities could probably be pretty easily mapped. But everything I might possibly do in 2027 cannot be so easily mapped. So like what's possible for me 2027 is like not mathematically available right now. What's possible for me in 2026 is mathematically available for me right now. So that's what I'm trying to describe with this equation is that like as you approach the future, the possibilities and like what's possible for you and how far ahead in your future that is, I'm trying to mathematically represent that um, in my theorem of one realities. That's kind of what I'm trying to do here with building this equation. And it's kind of, oh, I thought I took these down. These cheesy pictures, Michelangelo. Um, so this is just an inequality theorem. Like I said, I don't know if it's quite functional, could be. Um, but that all possible knowledge cannot catch up with like how fast reality is expanding. I just want to put a big emphasis on non-omniscience. Uh, like God is not all-knowing, and I don't think this is an accurate depiction of theology. I think it's a funny one. Um, so this is another kind of equation on a graph where the portion of reality that can be known at any minute uh, shrinks to zero. So it's like it becomes impossible. It's where omniscience becomes impossible. Like it increasingly becomes impossible. So it's just like kind of because to me, omniscience is the scariest thing. Like if you reach omniscience, you reach boredom, perpetual boredom. And so it's like I really want to just kind of really kind of be able to mathematically disprove, if possible, omniscience because eternal boredom scares me. I don't know about you. It scares me. So, ruling it out is a possibility and that like novelty can persist, um, is something I think that should be mathematically and conceptually explored. I think it's so yeah, it's me trying to hopefully rule out boredom for eternity. 'Cause like I said, I don't want to be bored forever. If we're looking at it forever ahead of us, I'm concerned about boredom. Um, so this is just more kind of speculative with cheesy cherub art. I thought I had removed from my portfolio. These pictures aren't loading on my other one, so I thought they were off my portfolio. I guess not. Um, but this pretty much sums it up. I think that existence is a serious thing, and the possibility, I think odds are probabilistically that there is a creator. And I've argued a lot in writing why I think that's true. And because that is, I believe that is true, then that means like eternity is like a very real possibility. And I've been grappling since a very young age. I was raised Catholic. So since a very young age, I've been grappling with the idea of eternity, so it's kind of creeped me out. Um, but lately, especially my spiritual journey, I've been kind of figuring out like, okay, I can understand how I can be like psychologically safe in an eternity and avoid boredom. So it's always been my fear of like, heaven's going to get boring, isn't it? And I think I've kind of theoretically ruled that out, that it doesn't have to. which I think is an important question to tackle. I think existence is a serious thing, and if I'm onto anything in terms of math or truth, peer review or verification, the questions of God and existence and heaven and hell and existing forever, these, if true, very serious topics. And, I don't think it's as simple as believing in one religion. God is a very political matter. And, I think that's really well represented in religion, that God is a political thing, but I think it needs to be viewed apolitically, because existence is serious, and eternity is serious, and we want to be able to imagine and conceptualize one that we would enjoy forever. Should we be around forever, which I think is very possible, and a lot of logic points to that, but there's not a lot of consensus, because it's political, as I said. Political is opposite of ethical, I think. And so we lack consensus, and everyone wants you to believe their religion because it monetarily benefits someone, rather than approaching this with the kind of veracity it needs and kind of demands, because existence is serious, suffering is serious. We suffer, hopefully not for long. And we want to be able to imagine, a happy place with what we already know. And I think I've done that. And I hope it kind of gets somewhere in the fields of philosophy. So thank you so much for watching, and sticking to the end if you did. My name is Holly. And once again, I accept donations at hashtag Coffee Crow 420. Appreciate all of that. And most of all, appreciate you listening. Thanks.